Good afternoon. I'm Breon Peace, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. Thank you all for joining us today. With me today are James Dennehy, Assistant Director in charge of the FBI's New York Field Office. We have Deputy Chief Carlos Ortiz, Commanding Officer of the NYPD Special Victims Unit. And we have my office's outstanding prosecution team, Aaron Reed, Megan Farrell, and Philip Pilmar. We're here today to announce the arrest and charging of 3 defendants. Former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, Oct Jeffries, Matthew Smith, and James Jacobson on charges of sex trafficking and engaging in interstate prostitution. Powerful individuals for too long have trafficked and abused for their own sexual pleasure young people with few resources and a dream of securing a successful career in fashion or entertainment. To anyone who thinks they can exploit and coerce others by using the so-called casting couch system, this case should serve as a warning. Prepare to trade that couch for a bed in federal prison. The message from today's prosecution is clear. Sexually exploiting vulnerable human beings is a crime, and doing so by dangling dreams of a future in fashion or modeling or any other business is no different. My office and our law enforcement partners will always prioritize standing up for victims, no matter their gender and no matter how powerful the wrongdoers think they are. We will hold them to account. As we allege in the indictment, between 1992 and 2014, Oct Jeffries was the chief executive officer of Abercrombie and Fitch. Abercrombie was a widely known clothing retailer with stores around the world. Aspiring fashion models knew that a place on one of Abercrombie's iconic ads could be the ticket to success in the modeling industry. But while Jeffries was the CEO of one of the most recognizable clothing retailers in the world, he was using his power, his wealth, and his influence to traffic men for his own sexual pleasure and that of his romantic partner, Matthew Smith. The charging documents describe in graphic and disturbing detail the violent and exploitive acts these defendants perpetrated, for which they will now face justice in a court here in the Eastern District of New York. So here's what's alleged in the indictment. Jeffries and Smith employed James Jacobson to act as a recruiter to find men. Jacobson engaged in, quote, tryouts with men across the world where he would typically pay them to engage in sex acts with him. Following the tryouts with Jacobson, Smith would often then personally approve whether the men who were selected would meet Jeffries and Smith. The defendants would fly the selected men to Jeffries and Smith's homes in the Hamptons in New York City, or to hotels around the world in such places as England, France, Italy, Morocco, and St. Bart's, for the purpose of attending events to engage in commercial sex. But beyond simply hiring men for sex, Jeffries, Smith, and Jacobson used force, fraud, and coercion to traffic those men for their own sexual gratification. For example, as alleged, the defendants employed a referral system and an interview process that did not inform the men of the details of the sex events before they attended, including the full extent and nature of the sexual activity that would be required of the men at these events. They caused the men to believe that attending these sex events could yield modeling opportunities with Abercrombie or otherwise benefit their careers. Smith and Jeffries employed a secret staff to operate these sex events. The staff ensured that the men signed non-disclosure agreements and handed over their personal items, such as their phones, before the start of the events to maintain the secrecy of these events. The defendants caused the men to believe that not complying with requests for certain acts, sex acts, during the events could harm their careers. The defendants pressured the men to consume alcohol, Viagra, and muscle relaxants known as poppers during the sex events. And they required the presence of staff during the sexual activity and ensured that the men did not leave the sex events until Jeffries and Smith decided that the sessions were over. Also, as alleged, on more than one occasion, Jeffries and Smith either directed others to inject or personally injected men with an erection-inducing substance for the purpose of causing the men to engage in sex acts the men were incapable of engaging in or unwilling to engage in. Additionally, the indictment alleges on more than one occasion when men did not or could not consent, Jeffries and Smith violated the bodily integrity of these men by subjecting them or continuing to subject them to invasive sexual and violent contact by body parts and other objects. As alleged in the indictment, Jeffries, Smith, and Jacobson didn't just carry this activity on for a couple of occasions. Their sex trafficking and prostitution enterprise lasted at least from the end of 2008 until early 2015. During that period, the defendants hired dozens of men and transported them to New York and around the globe. They spent millions of dollars on a massive infrastructure to support this operation and maintain its secrecy. This included hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash for commercial sex, prolific amounts of money for staff to run the sex events, money for domestic travel, international travel, hotel rooms, services from a security company, and Jacobson's salary, among other things. Now, this investigation remains ongoing. Although there are 15 John Does identified as victims in this indictment, this interstate prostitution venture encompassed dozens and dozens of men. And I encourage anyone with information about this case, including anyone who was a victim of the defendant's alleged crimes, to contact the FBI. 1-800-CALL-FBI. Now, I want to thank the victims who have already come forward for sharing their stories. Prosecutions like this are really impossible without the bravery of victims who are willing to report what happened to them to law enforcement. But this office, the Department of Justice, and its law enforcement partners will continue to work tirelessly to protect victims from powerful individuals who use their wealth and their influence to exploit and harm others for sexual gratification. In addition to my team, I'd like to give special thanks to FBI Special Agent Amanda Young and NYPD Detectives Paul Byrne and Antonio Pagan, who have worked hard on this investigation in the pursuit of justice.